Hello, everyone. Welcome to Nutanix Weekly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. I got Harvey Green and Jirah Cox with me. Harvey, how's it going?
I am doing well, just a few pounds bigger.
A few pounds bigger. Oh man, I've had such a whirlwind of a day. I feel like the holiday was, well, not yesterday. Like the long weekend was not yesterday.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed.
And got Jirah Cox with us still in his lair in his basement, and that's not a basement, is it? Is it a basement?
Correct, not a basement.
Okay, I could tell from the window that you probably weren't in a basement. Maybe a walkout basement. And he's got his most recent, I guess, maybe Nutanix shirt on. What's that one got on it? What's under the word Nutanix there?
Oh, this was for a little internal training team. So we set up some internal teams, and all the team leaders got a T-shirt. So they threw a picture of a little superhero on it. So
is that Cam Nutanix? Like Cam Newton Nutanix? For our listeners, it's a picture of a guy with his shirt spread open with the Nutanix logo. I don't know. I was trying to make a joke about Cam Newton, but it didn't work out.
Okay, sorry. I probably, and I failed to get it too, so my fault.
That's all right. You're not missing much. Well, Jirah and Harvey brought forth a article today from the Nutanix blog. The name of it is Objects 3.3, Improved Efficiency and Time to Value by Phil Gilbert from 29th of November. So that's like today.
That's today.
That is today.
Hot off the presses.
Hot off the presses.
If people even know what presses are anymore, right? Like our presses still a thing. I was at a birthday party for one of my kids' friends turning 8 or 9. And after the birthday song, right? Like we all used to as a kid, they sang all the extra verses, right? Like in Scooby-Doo on Channel 2. And I was like, I asked the parents, I'm like, do your kids know what channels are? Because my kids have no clue what channels are. They have no idea what these words even mean. Like, what is Channel 2? And they all laughed because they were like, we had never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
Like my kids know
like
the one remote that goes to Amazon and Netflix and Plex, and that's it.
Yep. That's like trying to discuss dial tone with them. What is that?
Yeah. You guys know whenever the soft phones came out, they actually had to invent dial tone for the soft phones because by default it didn't have it.
Yep.
Yeah. I remember when I worked for my first job, when we did our like digital PBX to VoIP transition, and someone told me like, yeah, the handset is just playing the dial tone like MP3 or WAV
It
file.
is. It's an MP3.
It's not going over the network. I'm like, whoa, that just blew my mind, man.
Yeah, thanks. Way to make me feel old.
I think we're the same age, Harvey. So
I know, but if dial tone wasn't bad enough, right? We had a dial tone MP3, and so not only are the kids saying what's dial tone, they're like, what's an MP3?
You're saying you feel old. We're like the same age, man. So I'm more immune to the effects of feeling old.
Yeah, you must be.
And I'm sure listeners don't want to hear us talk about it too much, but just think about how much technology has changed in our generation.
It's crazy.
I heard an interesting study that was talking about how, Gen X and millennials and all that jazz and Zoomers, like the traditional age-based grouping actually loses value for whatever, not tiering, but binning, right? And it's actually more pertinent to use, when did you discover the internet, right? Were you like the 80s generation of internet, like BBSs? Were you mid 90s with like dial-up transitioning to like initial broadband? Were you like 2000s? And that, regardless of age, has much stronger correlation with like how you will relate to your technological peers.
Yeah. So it's probably timing and then how open you were to the concepts that came with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. If you can remember like the bulletin board days, right? You're a different generation of internet user than like MySpace days.
Yeah. Well, and question for you guys, did you at some point feel like you were going to be always an adopter of whatever the latest, greatest thing was? Or have you got to the point where you're like, I don't want any more. I like it where it is right now, and I don't want it to change.
That's a hard question. I mean, I don't, as a technologist, I don't think I ever want to feel like number two, but there are times that I feel like number two.
I think there's a few areas of my life where I use a bit less like chewing gum and twine, right? Like I no longer like flash my my internet router, right? Or there's certain things that I need stability from that I don't want to hear about from like my family members at 2 p.m. about like, hey, this thing crashed, So it encourages me to do more robust engineering with the technology in my life.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I am sort of that way I'm definitely that way for other people. I am sort of the opposite for me. Like I was telling you guys about right before we jumped on to record, I had a few little issues I was dealing with Windows 11. And so I just wiped it and started over. And I did that, very much within the course of a day. And here I am back on that same machine and I don't have the little issues. And so that was a good exercise, but I kind of pride myself on being able to do stuff like that.
By today's standards, this is a great example. What does wipe it mean? Did you actually format the hard drive and put the OS back down, or did you hit the reset my machine button?
So I did hit the reset my machine button, but I did tell it to wipe all the settings and files and all of that.
Yeah.
But yes, I do come from the day where you did have to go break out the CD or set of CDs.
But see,
to do that.
If you know how to do it from the CDs, do you trust the whole reset system? I have a hard time.
Well, so you no longer have a choice because you don't get a CD.
Yeah.
Well, and you weigh the convenience versus the cleanliness of it. Would I rather just wipe out at least the partition table and reinstall my OS? Yes. Is there something really nice about hitting the reset, delete everything except the core files button and having it back up and somewhat functional in 30 minutes? It's hard to resist that level of convenience if you think it'll be good enough.
And Jirah, to your point, I did have it go and download a fresh copy.
See, there you go. That's what I mean. I'm all Mac, right? But like I can like wipe the hard drive, and at the BIOS level, I can go download a fresh OS from the internet. It's like I guarantee it's totally wiped. That machine couldn't boot. Totally fresh OS laid back down, and that I'll trust.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Couldn't be more off topic.
Right? Way more off topic.
I'll finish my part of that topic by saying this. Every time there's new evolutions in technology, the people around me, some of them in my household, it's like starting over. And so maybe I can adopt the newest, latest, greatest technology, or maybe the whole new concept that comes with it. It's just that now I'm having to re-evolve those around me. And sometimes I wish it would just stay still, at least long enough for me to get some momentum out of what happened before, so that I'm not now trying to re-educate totally different concept to replace the previous concept.
Yeah, agreed. I'm kind of same way. Like I say, as soon as I have access to those things, I will try them. And like the Windows 11 example, if I don't like what's happening, I'll wipe it and then I'll try again. And if I don't like it by the end of that, then I move on with something else.
Yeah.
Speaking of new features you can get just by installing updates.
Yeah, let's talk about Objects 3.3, improved efficiency and time to value in Nutanix. So Jirah, can you re-educate some of us on what Objects in general is?
Totally. So Objects is the name of our functionality for on-prem S3 storage. S3 storage, invented by Amazon, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, something like that. Back when the earth was young, for, storing large data sets at scale with web native technologies, right? So the way, NFS writes over the network as a network file system, the way SMB writes over, to a Windows share, to like a Windows file server that your client speaks. The web age, right, where I can put it in place via like an API request, and do like an HTTP upload download. And then my client can go, download it, right? So I can store like website images that way, store backup data that way. I could store, it's its own file system, right? So I could store anything, records, log data, tens of thousands of files of whatever I want, vast scale available to me. But it's fundamentally for that kind of a web-based, upload download kind of format. And so with this 3.3, right, which you can get if you're running objects now, just by running your lifecycle manager to pull down the latest version and automate that upgrade for you. Some updates here for you that you'll get are you've already had in Object 3.2, I think it was, the ability to tier out older data to AWS. So you can have a data store on-prem, keep only the most recent data, send older data out to public cloud if you wanted to. With this release, we also add Azure to that compatibility. So now you can send it up to S3 in AWS, or I believe it's Azure Blob up in Azure.
So Jirah, I was with a client this morning that's got a lot of video, police camera video.
Yeah.
They can use this technology to store it in mass. And when it gets to a certain point where they got to keep it even longer and they run out of room, or it's more cost effective to put in the cloud, this is going to allow them to aggregate it or push it up to the cloud. And they've got the best of both, the on-premises part of storing it, as well as the scalability of the cloud to store it in the same format.
Totally. Yeah. And video footage can be a fantastic use case for that, right? Because it's large, it's already compressed, right? We often care about, it's often, written once and like read rarely, right? Only if you're scanning back, to scan for motion or something like that. And so, usually that's a data type that seeks for like the most cost-effective, lowest cost per gig type of functionality. And so, Objects S3 storage is a fantastic use case for that. And if I had very, very long retention requirements, I would want to make sure I had, the most optimized place to put that. Right now, don't count Objects out for even that whole workload, right? Like, get your own TCO study, because it's actually even cost competitive against using public cloud. But use your own numbers, right, and do your own study. Make sure that you're using the most effective storage location for that.
Well, and that was the complaint this morning in the meeting, is that sticking it out in AWS solved a lot of problems, but it still got expensive over time.
Totally right. And then also all the traditional stuff around using public cloud, right? Cost of access for retrieval, transit in and out, and then of course there could be latency, right? If you needed to scan for it remotely compared to, it could be, in the next room if it ran on Nutanix. Yeah.
And dumb question for me, how does this change? I mean, do you still back this stuff up? Do you replicate it somewhere else, or is it's somewhat resilient, where it's resting here? Then do you maybe replicate that to another Nutanix cluster somewhere else? Is that common?
So it's actually super resilient in a lot of ways, right? Not only like all of the foundational goodness of AOS, right, with the rapid rebuilds and software-defined storage, scale out, everything that we do for all the data we ever host. On top of that, S3 itself supports stuff like the worm functionality. So write once, read many, and legal compliance. So with S3 data, you can even get to a point on a Nutanix cluster where that data really truly is immutable. No one can delete it before it hits its retention lock of whatever you want, 3 years, 7 years, whatever you're mandated for there. So usually if you need a multi-site availability, that's going to be a replication, right? You don't typically back it up and then restore it somewhere else, but you can just replicate it or write it to both places if you wanted to.
Yeah. So Harvey, this first announcement is about not only being integrated with Amazon, but also integrated with Azure. Any additional points you think we ought to make there?
Yeah, I mean, this is just Nutanix continuing their journey, right? There were a lot of features that were set up with Amazon that were ready. And then there were some things in Azure that lagged behind, some because the integration needed to be written there, and some because Azure didn't have all of the same feature parity with what Amazon had in place already. So glad that everyone is getting back together and working again. And this is, some fruits of that labor so that you have options available to you.
Yeah. Well, I think don't forget, like, depending on how you want to use it, It can even be your backup storage location, right? So like think about that. If you were using something as your Veeam target, as your Haiku target, would you think of that as needing its own backup, right? Probably not. You would simply have a second copy for backups if you wanted like an offsite copy of that data.
Right.
Yeah, it's what, like we talked about in several of the recent podcasts, where you have best of breed Nutanix, in this case, objects, now able to talk to the public cloud infrastructure, which has the scalability that most of us long for. You take those two things and mix them together. Now you've got best solution for customer in question.
Yeah.
Next section talks about improved time to value for analytics. Jirah, what's this announcement related to?
So the short version is supporting that S3 select protocol. But what that really means is, in my super layman's mind, is like I can request parts of a file, right? So if the data, this blog article says semi-structured, I think it's a good way to think about it. If it's like a CSV file, rather than say I want that CSV file back, like customer records, this is saying I can make an API request or a call that says send me back just the rows in that spreadsheet where the customer country equals USA, right? Or something like that. I can get back a subset of the data, which is within perhaps a single file, rather than have to pull down the entire file. Just send me back what I want. Since we support stuff like Splunk Smart Store, like sending all my analytics and logs and security data to an S3 storage location, well, now I could say, just send me back the logs from that one client, or send me back, website hits matching this source IP address. And just give me that back faster. So faster retrieval of data and less traversal as well. Like less data has to come across the wire.
And that's all doable through APIs. Does Nutanix provide the front end for this, or that's up to you, to the application provider, or you to write the front end for the API integration?
So I would think of it more like, the same way like you would deploy files on Nutanix as a NAS, right? To be a shared file storage. We rarely are, Nutanix is almost never the client for that, right? We're not mounting those file shares and sending our data to it. That's for like your workstations to do. Same thing here, like an S3 storage is for your applications to talk to that are sending and receiving that S3 data. So they'll usually be the one, maybe a body cam data, writing that data in a structured format. Now that client, which is an S3 supported client, can now pull back just the data it wants to from like camera 1, 2, 3 or whatever.
Right. Yeah, this is super timely. We were having some of these conversations this morning, and we're talking about what Nutanix brings to the mix above and beyond hyperconverge in terms of solving problems for people.
Yeah.
Harvey, any things you want to comment about on this section, the improved time to value piece?
No, I mean, I think you guys hit it pretty well. This is just better, faster by using the technology to have less come across and be more specific around what you're getting.
And Jirah, the third of the 3 points made in this article is the ingest large volumes of data efficiently. Help us understand that piece.
Yeah, so this is talking about time to move data down to our erasure coded tier. So erasure coding, unlike traditional workloads, right, where we'll simply write 2 copies or 3 copies, RF2, RF3 in our parlance of storing data. We also support erasure coding, right, where if it's cold data, it's, especially if it's only been written once and isn't going to get updated, then we'll erasure code it, right? We can actually store less than 2 full copies, but still be able to recreate the data if we had, say, a disk failure or a node failure. So there's no risk added to the data, but we can also give you back more usable space. Since objects is one of our, in theory, like largest scalable workloads, right? You can get to like a multi-petabyte objects workload quite easily. Then if I needed to RF2 that full data, that's a lot of capacity. If I can ECX it faster, right? If I can erasure code it faster, then I get more usable space back on the cluster, right? So this talks about doing it 7 times faster. Usually that ECX threshold is commonly 1 week, right? So after it's been 1 week written cold, then we'll move it from RF2 down to erasure coded. 7x faster. You can imagine this sounds to me like I think it's happening after about 1 business day, one calendar day actually, right? So 24 hours. So doing that faster means I now have 6 more days worth of capacity of ingest, right? Whatever my rate is, right? If I'm doing 100 terabytes a day, that's 600 terabytes usable that I just got back from the cluster. So erasure coding, I think of it as like hipster RAID almost. It's not disk based, it's data block based, right? So rather than saying it's disks 1, 2, 3, 4, and disk 5 is all parity or even distributed parity, it's more like I wrote pieces of data A, B, C, D, and then I wrote a 5th piece of data E, that is enough to reconstruct any of those missing pieces if I needed to. But I can do that at like the 1 megabyte level or whatever you want to do for your granularity.
All right, so pronounce it for me again, but slow.
Erasure coding.
Eraser coding.
Erasure coding. Yep.
Erasure coding.
Yep.
I have never understood what that was in all this time.
Yeah.
Just say it real fast and move on. Nobody ever asked.
So because remember, RAID is the redundant array of independent disks.
Yeah.
And so erasure coding doesn't care about the underlying disk geometry. It occurs at the data level, right? So it's saying if I write, to use a terrible analogy that probably will make every actual engineer on the call like cry, if I wrote like Word document 1, 2, 3, 4, and then Word document 5 with like a bitwise math, it's still, a differencing, what is it? Is that a binary XOR? I'm sorry, don't email me. Math, so I can reconstruct the missing piece of data, but it's occurring at the data level, not the disk level.
Yeah. It's enough, like a synopsis of what was written, enough to put it back if necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Is it identical to what needs to go back, or is it just enough to get the general idea?
So it's also, this is all in the Nutanix Bible. We'll even adjust the erasure coding. Usually we'll say like strip size versus with RAID, there were all the hard coded, we memorized like RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 5, RAID 10, RAID 6. With erasure coding, typically people refer to like strip sizes of like a 2+1, a 4+1 strip size. And that refers to if I do erasure coding 4+1, then it's going to the same thing. It's going to be 4 actual data bits and then a 5th parity bit, right, that I would use to reconstruct any one of those missing bits. So 20% overhead for my redundancy data, right, the parity data.
Parity data, yeah. Okay. Well, no, that was worth the price of admission right there.
There you
go. Harvey, thoughts, comments on
concept? He explained it well. How it works in my head is kind of how he explained it. It's probably a little different in my head, but I'll leave it at how he explained it. It is just not at the disk level, it's at the data level. So it's much closer, and you're much better off in a failure situation since you don't have to have all the necessary disks in order to make that work.
And all of this around objects is a way to conveniently store a massive amount of data and be able to access it and move it around and not overconsume the disk subsystem. And that's basically objects in a nutshell, and it just keeps getting better.
Totally. Yeah.
Yes.
That's a fantastic summary. Yeah.
Fantastic summary. Of course. Thank you for helping me understand that.
Oh, of course, man.
Well, guys, I guess that's it. I think we've covered this blog. Jirah, any additional topics or comments or concepts you want to bring up?
That'll do it for me. As always, you can kick the tires on objects on the Nutanix test drive.
Yeah, we should always bring that up. The ability to do a test drive with Nutanix, and just that functionality as a way to get engaged and learn how the technologies work firsthand. It's amazing that we have that, and we've had a whole podcast on that just topic alone. But the fact that Nutanix brings real-time lab actions for their customers and partners is extremely valuable. Speaking of labs, Harvey, you got a workshop coming up sometime soon, right?
I do. It is 2 days away.
Sounds like good registrations. I again met with a client this morning. I'll make sure that they get invited to that one as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I say think. I think this one might be our last one for 2021. But we'll see. There was definitely lots of demand for this, so I don't think we'll fit another one in, but we'll see what happens after tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, guys, I appreciate it. Thanks for jumping on a Monday after Thanksgiving, and look forward to what you guys bring next week to talk about.
Cool. Talk to you then.
Absolutely.
Thanks, guys.